Welcome to the Superfluous Fifth String. My guest today is one of Ireland's finest banjo players. Originally from Luton in the UK and now resident in County Sligo, she is in huge demand as a banjo teacher. In 2018, she released her critically acclaimed debut album, BANJO'ista. Please enjoy my chat with Theresa O'Grady. I have the wonderful Theresa O'Grady, the BANJO'ista. That was the name of your debut album. My only disappointment, Theresa, was that BANJO'ista I thought that maybe you'd be making a coconut latte at the same time as playing banjo. Like the combination of barista and banjoist.
Yeah, I do that regularly at home, Enda. That's my... Yeah, I do actually. Yeah. We're big coffee fiends in this house. So I've every kind of a coffee contraption under the sun. Yeah, wonderful. In this house. Yeah.
You are one of Ireland's premier banjo players, a very prolific banjo teacher. I know this for a fact, and I'm a big fan of your playing. You've quite a different style to me, and we met up during the summer. I think that was very apparent that the way that you play the banjo is a lot lighter than the way that I play the banjo. I hit it.
Yeah.
And you stroke it.
As long as you don't hit people with it, I think you're on a winner there, Enda.
I definitely. Yeah. Well, some people need to be hit with a banjo.
Well, yeah, that's what they say, isn't it? If you've got a good slap of the back of the banjo across the back of the head.
Tell me how you got started on banjo, how you developed the style that you have now. Did it happen naturally? Did you need very careful instruction? Was there things that needed to be corrected at the start?
Yeah, it's funny actually that we talk about this, and I've actually spoken to two different pupils about this already this week about if you didn't go off on your own tangent for 3 or 4 years and took instruction from someone, would you be better? Would you be a better player? Would you be a worse player? Depending on, I suppose, who you got the instruction from. That was the core of a couple of conversations I actually had this week with a couple of pupils. For me, I'd say I had really good instruction from a really good teacher when I was a kid. So while and I think, with kids, there's always an element of that natural ability, but you have to kind of round it off then with instruction. So yeah, I would have had, I know technique wise, it would have been, this is how you hold it. And I think as a child as well, you do a lot of copying. So you do what you see. And then I would have had, good instruction for, use your plectrum like this, use your left hand like this, positioning, things like getting in and out of high Bs, that kind of thing. So I think, yeah, while I had, I know I had natural ability for music, but then to hone that into banjo playing, it was a lot of, really very good direction, good instruction.
So do you think that it's a very technical instrument in that, every instrument is technical, right? Apart from the bodhrán, which is why I can't help but become controversial immediately. I find that the banjo is an extremely technical instrument, and that it's a very harsh mistress, if you wish, in that if you don't have the decent techniques down from the start, it's a really steep uphill battle.
Yeah, I do think that. I think there are an element of, put your fundamentals together first, I think, and I think it's the most unforgiving instrument. I really think so. It's it's not like when you hit a note on the banjo, that's it, it's gone. That you can't try and scoop around it and bring it back and pretend it wasn't a mistake. A mistake is a mistake, no matter what way you go at it on the banjo. So I think it's if you can ground that element, I suppose, of technique in first, because there's so many things going on at both ends of the banjo, and then within there's so many things that are going on at both ends of the banjo, when you start breaking it down into even smaller sections, it's just like there is so much. Even to strike one note, there's so much going on. You have to use, put a finger on a note. If you're going to play a chord, you need two strings. What direction does your plectrum go in? Where is your wrist? Which parts are moving and which parts are not moving? There's an awful lot going on. There is. And I do think, like you say, it's an unforgiving one then as well at the end of it, if you just get it really wrong.
So do you think there are natural banjo players?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. And I would see that, I suppose you look at that more so when you're teaching kids, but you can see like that whole relaxation thing. You can see, I think, in a child, especially even when they start playing a tin whistle, you can see that if their hands are nice and relaxed and their posture is nice and relaxed, that they're not kind of completely tense with everything they're doing. You can see someone who is naturally geared towards playing a banjo, definitely.
So is that how you accept students? You kind of have a look and see how
Yeah.
stressed they are first.
Stressed again. Well, it's probably the same as, I would imagine it is the same as like flute players looking at the shape of people's mouths to see, like, would they naturally be a good flute player from the shape of their mouth? It is something that believe it or not, I only heard a documentary the other day about that, Enda, on I don't know what program it was on, something on the radio the other day about a girl who was teaching flute, and it was for, I think actually for a music generation. They're looking to try and encompass the older generation of Irish people this year to go off and learn an instrument. And that was one thing she said. She actually looks at the shape of people's mouths to see whether they would be a good flute player. So I think when she touched on it on the radio and said it, I was like, God, yeah, do you know what? I do that. Like, I look at, kids' hands. Are they going to be able to reach the notes on the banjo? Because it is a big stretch, no matter what way you look at it. There's a lot more journey to take between two notes on a banjo than there is on most other instruments.
Two thoughts popped to mind. One is that there's a branch of cosmetic surgery available here. flute playing lip adjustments. And the other is, I usually paid most attention to the mother that was dropping the kid off to see.
Did you? For what reason, Enda?
Not checking out their flutable lips, to see whether the kid really wanted to play the banjo or not.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That is an interesting one as well. Who's the interested party? The mother or the child?
Yeah, because the kid may develop an interest, but not often. From time to time, you will get the kid who wants to play hurling or wants to play sport or video games, and the mother who wants them to play the banjo, and it's never going to work.
But I do think though as well that it also takes a certain type of kid who wants to play a banjo. I do, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people. It's a certain type of child. Generally, the more boisterous, louder children in the tin whistle class will eventually go down the road of playing the banjo. That's my theory on it.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, because it's just that kind of instrument, isn't it? I think it's just
loud and obnoxious.
Well, now that's it. There's two words you can put into a sentence, and the third word is banjo.
There is a particular, there's a particular type of lunacy to most banjo players that you would meet on the circuit that may not be there with other instruments. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, like I think your fiddle and flute players they're just a bit more on an even keel than most of your banjo players, I think, to be honest with you.
That's because
And
they have nicer lips.
yeah, that probably has a lot to do with it.
And
The banjos are
short,
definitely, there's a
short,
touch.
stubby fingers. That's the problem.
What? Who now? The banjo players or
No,
the
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 fiddlers.
flute players
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
flute players? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Some of them do, but they're no. There's definitely a type. There's a type that plays a banjo. Sure,
yeah.
look at us.
I know. Type B.
Oh, gee, I'd say D or E, and never mind B.
Oh,
Oh
you
dear.
must miss the crack, and because we're all at home, and my God, like Irish music is such a social. I don't know if there's a folk music like it. Maybe bluegrass, though they do tend to spend an awful lot of time sitting in a circle playing the one tune over and over without any disrespect to them. But Irish music, we all just get together and we all play the tune, and you know, five people can play the same tune at the same time and play five different versions at the same
Oh,
time,
absolutely.
and it's
Yeah,
awesome. You must
and
miss
it
it.
still works.
Yeah, you must
Yeah, I
miss the
do.
crack.
Yeah, miss the yeah, and it's not even like it's not even just the music either. Like it is the whole social event of it. It's meeting up with your fellow musicians and going for dinner and the ordinary things you do with your friends, because sure, most of my friends are musicians as well. So yeah, you'd miss a whole aspect of it. The playing. Yeah, it was funny. There was a guy There's a guy in New Zealand. Of course, they got to have a normal. They have a normal enough life in New Zealand. So there's a guy that I'm teaching out there at the moment, and him and his mates has got together for a Christmas session just the week before Christmas, and he just sent me an audio clip on WhatsApp. He just said, "Oh, listen, wishing you a Merry Christmas, all the best. I'm at the weekly session. This is our Christmas session." Sent me the clip, and I'm not joking. My heart sank. I was like, "Oh, I'd give anything. I'd give anything to be there." And it was that whole kind of, you could instantly hear the musicianship between them. You could hear the glasses clinking in the background of the pub. You could hear the till ringing. You could hear, like, there was just so many things about it. Just in a 30-second clip, I was like, yeah, I really, really missed that. It was so strange, like, because I think most people have kind of got through this year, so they've got through. You've got through the summer and you missed all the festivals, and then you were like, maybe we'll get a tune at Christmas, and then that didn't happen then either, and you kind of, you keep kind of pushing it forward a bit, and you're kind of not really thinking about how much you miss of the whole aspect of it. But for that 30 seconds, I was like, damn it. Anyway, yeah, I'd give anything to be sitting in a pub having a few tunes. I really would.
How do you compare teaching online to teaching in person? Are there any advantages to it?
I think there is, to be honest, Enda. I think it's probably easier to hone in on certain things. Do you know what? Especially technique. I don't know, you know, when you're trying to show somebody, exactly maybe something that's going on with the left hand or going on with the plectrum, or you can really, obviously cameras, everything, all the rest of it. Like, you can really kind of drag your camera in, show what's going on with a certain technique. Um, Camera angles, that kind of thing. I just think it's not the worst environment to be teaching in. Probably if in a live situation, obviously you can stand over someone to a degree and say, okay, fix the angles of your banjo, fix this, fix that. You can do certain elements of that, but you see an awful lot, and I think I personally, when I'm looking at someone playing now through a screen, I really do hone in on um, really hone in on their hands, and maybe a lot paying. I'm probably paying an awful lot more attention to that than I ever did when I was teaching in a live situation, where I suppose you can concentrate your time on one hand or the other, one end of the banjo or the other. So yeah, I kind of like it. I can't say now I'm allergic to it at this stage, even though I've been doing it for over a year or so. I quite enjoy it. I really do. I think you can maybe cut through a lot of crap as well. When you're online and you're just like focusing in on certain aspects of people's playing.
And would you, because the one thing that's missing, of course, is the ability for you to play along with somebody that you're teaching. And I guess that the fact that you can't do that means that you have more time to do exactly what you've been describing. But like, do you get them to mute their mic and you just play and they play? Yeah, not that you're going to pick up an awful lot, but I mean they'll get to experience it.
But I think for the benefit of if you're trying to, that's the element I would miss of it from a live point of view, that when you're trying to help someone maybe develop rhythm, like that, there's nothing like, so you've been there yourself, sitting in a class of 10 pupils in Milltown Melby and all that racket going on around you. But if you can kind of stress and play rhythm very, very deliberately in that kind of an environment, you can actually hear the room coming round to what you're doing eventually. I know it that kind of thing takes time, but that was one exercise I suppose I really miss from not having a live class and not having a live class of people, not just a one-to-one, but I mean where that kind of, it's quite infectious when you're in a workshop environment like that, where especially with things like rhythm, where you're really trying to hone in on stuff like that, you can actually, you can hear it beginning to, it's a bit like the coronavirus, it starts to spread around the room.
That's a good. That'd be a good tagline for your website. Theresa O'Grady,
Yeah, it'd be
banjo
great,
lessons like the coronavirus.
It spreads like wildfire.
Would you? What do you think about banjo styles? And to refer back to what you were just talking about, I remember hearing a young fiddle player playing online, and I knew before I read the description that she was a student of Brian Conway's, because she looked like Brian when she played, and she was like 11, and she had the same mannerisms and the same, and you could see that immediately. Do you think the same thing is available on banjo, going back to the whole technique thing and everything? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, say, especially with, say, that age group of kids, they do what they see. They really, really do. Like, I know there's a kid I've been teaching since she was maybe about 10 or 11, Sinead Johnson, and literally, like if you put a camera on my hand, plectrum hand, and put a camera on hers, it'd be very hard to pick between them. And a lot of other teachers have said that. They're like, "Oh, she just has your plectrum hand." you can. I think kids do that in general. They will mimic what they can see. I mean, obviously, there's certain aspects of it, then they'll just adapt to their own doing as well. But yeah, I think you can pick kids out of their teachers in an awful lot of ways, and then that leads on then to different styles. It absolutely does, I think. Yeah, there are so many different styles of banjo playing. Like it's.
But it's a totally new phenomenon, because like fiddle, flute have had hundreds of years of geographical styles. Banjo's literally, what is it, around 40 years?
Yeah, it's very, very small in the bigger scheme of things, I suppose. And I like, if you were to roll the clock back and say where did it change? Because like if you listened back to, say, the likes of the Flanagan brothers, and listen to what they did with their music at the time, the banjo was really used very much as a rhythm. It wasn't like while they were obviously playing the melody, there was still that kind of pulsy kind of banjo playing within it. So it was used very much as a rhythm part of what they were doing. But then if you fast forward then to where is that moment in time that the banjo moved from being the rhythm to more of a melody and being able to express itself more as a melody instrument? I would have to say it was Barney McKenna that did that. Like it's that turning point of doing maybe more fiddle type ornamentation on the banjo. Like for me, he would be that turning point where it went from just playing a very plain type melody with lots of rhythm in it to playing the melody with lots of ornamentation in it. And then if you probably drill down from there, you're looking at your Mick O'Connor's, your John Carty's, and then that filters down then even further into the next generation and the next generation. I'm not saying John Carty's old now, just in case John hears this.
Is it a very? I mean, my big influence would have been Jerry O'Connor, who immediately brought an American flavor to Irish banjo, and he was completely out there in terms of the Irish tradition.
Yes, and I think he treated his two instruments very differently, because he's also a fiddle player, isn't he? And so he doesn't play the banjo like a fiddle, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but do you hear an American influence when in your banjo? I mean, in my music there was always an American influence. I think it was latently there, always waiting to come out, and as soon as I heard Jerry, I was like, this is what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think that there's that element as well of it being that very ornate type of melody instrument as well. Like that was probably the bit of, say, trad banjo players. I know there was never that many of them anyway. If you roll back, past the 40s and 50s, but that's what the likes of, say, Jerry brought into it then as well, was that little twist and turn of it being this other step that bringing elements of trad music more in towards an American sound as well, even with the twists and turns Jerry would make playing a tune. That would have that influence in it then as well. And that is also then very, like, it is still quite different to, say, if you take John Carty's playing and Jerry O'Connor's playing. Like, John is still very, very much, it's hinged on the rhythm, but then there's all these little like flurries of ornamentation in it that you can hear bits of Jerry in some of what John does. You can hear bits of John in what Angelina Carberry does. You can, like, and that leads to all of these different kinds of styles. Like, there are so many different kinds of styles that bring it back then to, okay, banjo playing has only been around for 40 or 50 years, but God, it's very diverse, even as it stands at the minute. Do you not think?
It is incredibly diverse, but I think it's a really fascinating instrument within the context of Irish traditional music, because it came essentially from America. The forerunners of Irish banjo happened in America, And then the guy that made it famous, essentially, as you said, Barney McKenna, mostly wasn't really playing what we would describe as traditional Irish music. He was in a very famous ballad band in the Dubliners. So it had this really kind of sideways entrance into now being considered a traditional Irish instrument. And, if you go to the banjo competitions, it's like you have to play it in this traditional Irish style that came after its introduction into Irish music in the first place, which is kind of backwards and a bit funny.
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a chicane twist to it, all right, with what you're with how it became part of traditional Irish music. It's very much, it did take a bit of a U-turn if you think about it that way. But I wonder though as well, underneath all of that, like if you take that turning point of Barney McKenna. But I wonder what. Okay, so you would have heard, and we all heard, the commercial end of Barney McKenna's playing, and that would have been what he did with the Dubliners. And then from there, then I suppose the inlet we got into what Barney could do was probably that series he did. When he did that series, did you ever see that?
No.
Ah. You have got to go and Google the Green Linnet. So they took off basically in a car and travelled across Europe and stopped off in different towns and basically took the instruments out and played and met the locals and all the rest of it. But that, like, I can remember seeing that. Well, maybe I was about maybe 15 or 16, and I remember looking at it going, oh my God, like you always had elements of you always knew, I think you always knew what Barney McKenna could do if he was sitting down and just playing tunes, but I had never actually heard it. I'd never heard Barney doing that because you only ever got small riffs of it or bits of it in between the songs when he played with the Dubliners, and then all of a sudden you had this whole program of himself and Tony McMahon playing tunes, and it was electrifying music, absolutely unbelievable music. And that, like, when I remember seeing that and seeing, like I'd say, when they did that, there was no editing within what they were doing for filming the actual tunes. It was literally like, right, lads, come on, let's get the instruments out and play a few tunes. Unbelievable. The playing was just unreal. It was a huge mixture of really ornamentated playing with all the chords, because Barney obviously knew chords on the banjo inside out, and it was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I'll send you the link.
Do, because I've never heard of that.
It's
Barney
epic.
didn't come across
Absolutely.
my register as a banjo player, except for Sweet 16 and the songs in the Dubliners. My first introduction to banjo was Jerry O'Connor, essentially, even though I'd been playing it for a few years, and but that was the light bulb moment. And I never went and looked back to what Barney was doing. So that's fascinating. I'd love to listen to that.
Oh yeah, there's probably, they maybe did 6 or 7. It was a series, and so there was about 6 or 7 programs within that series. It was just mind blowing for me. It was mind blowing because you really got the other side of what Barney McKenna could do with the banjo. And that was that point where you kind of went, right. For me, that was, if you were looking at kind of a timeline of where the banjo traveled from and to and where it is now today, that for me, Barney would be that turning point, I think.
Do you ever wish you played a different instrument?
I'd really love to be able to play the fiddle well, but I don't think I'd like to be a fiddle player. Put it that way. Do you know, it's that sounds awful, doesn't it? No offense to any fiddle players that see this. I would. It's kind of my guilty pleasure. I play the fiddle quite a lot, really badly. I am like Sherlock Holmes, really. Do you know that? Like, there's plenty of scratching and scraping going on. I would love to be a good fiddle player, but I just can't move a bow that long when I'm used to using a piece of plastic this big. That's the biggest problem. Yeah. Other than that, I really think I would love to have, and I still could. There's nothing stopping me. I would love to be able to play the piano. You know, I would love to sit down and actually do my music theory properly, because I really have no music theory at all, apart from writing notes on a page and hoping for the best that they're right, and they're not always right. But piano, I think, like, it's such a great instrument, the piano, because you can see everything. It's all there. All you should do is press a note and it's there. You haven't got to put a finger and play a string or nothing. It's instant. It's instant, and it's in tune.
And you put strings on it and they stay on it for decades.
Yeah.
Not every 3 gigs.
Yeah. And like, you don't need a new plectrum every time you pick up a banjo.
Do you get frustrated with the lack of what I would see is a lack of consistency, perhaps, in pick material, in the different types of picks, the different designs, strings? Like, I find you're never really 100% sure what it's going to sound like when you restring it. You're hoping for the best, but it's not consistent.
Yeah, and but that probably has a lot to do as well, just with the makeup of the banjo. You know, you're relying on, you know, the head of the banjo always being at a certain tension, and all of them things have to move when you're playing an instrument that has so many mechanical parts to it. You know, things get loose, things get tight, you know, all that kind of stuff that's going on. So, you know, even you know, the bridge is not fixed to the banjo, so that's going to move too. There's so many bits of it that I suppose make it inconsistent. I think I've finally found picks that I really like, which make a huge difference, and they're consistent.
Do tell, what are they?
Well, they're these little Alice guitar picks. I had a little box there, but I don't know what I've done with it. They're just I don't know if you can see that. I don't know which end of the phone that camera is on.
Never come across those before.
Do you know?
No.
I tell you what, they come in this little, it's really cool. Where is it? Oh, there it is.
They look quite hard.
I'll show you this. Yeah, they are, yeah. Sure, look, I play with like a brick. So you get this little box, right?
Ooh, I like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's really cool. It's got one of them poppy lids, woohoo. And then in there, I know, I love me gadgets. I'm not a technical person, but I do like gadgets. So in here you get 3 different grades of pick. You get a 0.46, a 0.7 something, and a 0.8 something. So you can even like find what ones you really like, and they're brilliant, and they're actually very, very durable. Like they take a serious amount of playing and abuse, which is great. Then you haven't got to use a new pick every gig or every time you sit down to play a few tunes.
Do you know how many picks I use in each gig? And I mean use and throw. Use and throw away. Minimum of 2, and 3 if it's really loud and I have to dig in.
Do you not throw them to the crowd at the end?
Sometimes they sneak up on stage and steal them, and I'm like, what are they going to do with it?
Oh, of course.
Kind of a half-worn pick.
That's just a...
Lick it,
but
maybe.
That's like robbing. We used to rob the posters off the gigs we used to go to on the pub doors.
Yeah, well, posters, but little bits of plastic.
It's the same thing. They're just looking for a momentum. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you should do like what they do in Wimbledon. Woo! Like with the tennis ball when they're finished. You need to start doing that with your picks at the
Yeah, you
gigs.
run the risk of a great deal of embarrassment when you come to flick a pick off the stage and the wind blows it back at you. So I'm not even going to go down that route. I'm a banjo player. I'm practiced in avoiding embarrassment as much as possible.
Yeah, well, sure. Look, when you have to stand behind a banjo, it's bad enough.
What kind of strings do you use? I feel very jealous of like my brother when he goes and he spends $120 on 4 strings, and I'm like, they must be awesome. And I'm putting silicon wrapped, electric guitar strings on my banjo because they last more than 1 gig.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you're like in the bigger scheme of things, like banjos are cheap maintenance instruments, really. Like the strings are whatever. I use Alexas on these mostly, I think. But I've dabbled with phosphor bronze Didarios and different things. But I like Alexas because there's a really, I think there's a nice clean sound of them, and they work particularly well with the Alice picks. There you go. So if Alexa or Alice Picks would like to send me some merch, they no problem. I'll put my postcode onto the end of this, and you'll find me.
Awesome. So, do you absolutely hate new banjos, or do you just prefer vintage?
I just prefer vintage. Now, having said that, I have to say I was wholeheartedly impressed when I played yours the day that I was down at your house. For
a new neck for
a new banjo. Yeah, I really, really was. And I think it had a lot to do with, well, it instantly had a lot to do with the sound. Like, I've never played a new banjo that sounded vintagey, if you know what I mean. So I have to say, I really enjoyed playing that day, and it has stuck in my head since. So there you go. That's a good thing. But I think it's the whole with the vintage banjos. It's like it's everything. It's the trouble they went to when they made them. It's the engravings and the inlays and the probably just them being so individual as well. But there's no 2 of them really the same.
So you love a bit of bling, is that what you're trying to say?
I do. I'm very fond of a bit of bling, yeah. I'm not really a big jewellery person. I prefer to have blingy banjos.
I like a bit of bling on my knee.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Have you found the perfect banjo, or?
Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Wow.
No doubt.
Well, tell us about
Absolutely.
it. You might even show it to me.
Yeah, I will. It's this one. This is the Epiphone Deluxe. Oh, I can't see myself in that camera, Enda, but I'm hoping that you can see.
No, I can see it. I can see your
there.
Christmas tree as well, which is awesome.
Oh, can you? Okay, of course you can. Yeah, in the reflection of the head. Yeah, it took a while. I'd say I played. Well, I've always kind of had, and when I switched from my banjo, I originally had a James Burton banjo, which was made in the UK. Actually, a really nice banjo. That would have been the banjo my parents got me when I was 10 or 11. That was my first proper banjo, and I played that right up until probably nearly 17 or 18 years ago. And then the first Epiphone I had is an Epiphone concert, and I have that there as well. But I suppose I was looking for the perfect banjo in every way. Like the first one I had, the Epiphone concert, didn't have an original Epiphone resonator on it. So I wanted the whole lot. I wanted the full package. So I sent Joe Diamond off on a mission to get me an Epiphone Deluxe, which I really liked the look of when I started doing a bit of drilling down into what I liked and stuff. This is the back, and it's all gold plated, and they went to a lot of trouble with beautiful carvings and engravings on the metal. Inlay just immaculately done. And he went off anyway, and this is how individual they really are. I played at least 4 different Epiphone deluxe banjos before I played this one, and was very on the fence about the other 4. But this one, just whatever it was, it just all completely worked. Everything worked. Everything about it just instantly played.
Is it frustrating? It's deeply frustrating to me that you can take 4 either brand new banjos, 4 clarines that are all made exactly the same way, and they're all completely different. And you can take, like, I could go online right now and buy, well, if there was one available in Epiphone Deluxe, and then get it, and then just it never being a decent banjo. That frustrates the living daylights out of me. I do think that that's something that Tom Neckville seems to have worked on really well, in that he's got a lot of consistency because his building process is so technical.
And so when he builds you a banjo, like, are the necks all the same spec? Are, you know, the depth, the width of the neck, is that all his measurements, or is there input in it for you to maybe have some input into that? How does that work? Because I reckon back in the day, the player definitely got input into what they got definitely from Epiphone. I really do think that, yeah, I do, because I know, like, I think this is, I don't know what this is going to sound like now, but there was definitely ladies' banjos and fellas' banjos. There was. And like, I've heard banjos being referred to. If you read back through old archives and bits and pieces, I've heard them referring to ladies' banjos. And I think in general, they just made the neck and the scale of it slightly smaller. Yeah. And even the the actual pot size of the banjo, or the depth of the flange to fit the resonator on, slightly smaller. Ladies' banjos. I do think the person, the player, definitely had input at the making stage of some of these banjos. Probably the ones, the upper end ones, that were obviously not so mass produced, that you would have been in the factory at the time of production. So does Tom do that?
I mean, he's made two banjos for me, essentially. And one of them is a very unique hybrid of an Irish, kind of an Irish pot end and then a 5-string neck, so that you get the resonance. But I would have sent him, neck width measurements, so that it wasn't a big wide 5-string neck that I couldn't, manage with. And then the true Irish tenor banjo that we designed is very much based on Irish scale. It's got, an Irish neck length, and it'd be very similar to an Epiphone. Now, it does have a radius neck, which is very, I do think that's more unusual. That's not in the Epiphones. I think that makes a big difference to tone. The other thing that he does use, which is I think is great, is like really high quality materials. So the frets are really high quality nickel. Like, there's a very high percentage of nickel in them. I've had nearly 4 years of play on the one that I bring on the road, and there literally isn't the slightest indentation in the frets. And as we've covered, I'm a hard player, and then there's not an awful lot of wood. Like, the only wood really is the neck itself. Like, the pot and all of that is alloy material, and I just think you don't get the same range of, discrepancies when you're making something that's so carefully tooled. And the other thing that I love about them, and this is again the reason that I've kind of strayed away from vintage, is that, like, with something like the neckfill banjo, you can adjust every single thing on the road. So the head tension in seconds, the neck is completely adjustable in seconds. You can actually take the neck off and put it in your pocket, and then stick it back on the next night, and you can get the banjo in perfect working order with very little technical ability.
Yeah, and that is well, especially for a player that's on the road, I would imagine, like, teasing out all of those aspects of making a banjo. That's genius, absolutely genius. It really is, because you can do the adjustments.
Yeah, and banjo, I think banjo likes humidity. It likes a nice bit of moisture in the air. Take any banjo and bring it up to the top of a mountain in Colorado, and the head gets so tight.
Yeah.
And the ability to be able to lower that immediately and get the banjo sounding nice, and then fly to Kentucky where it's like 98% humidity, is like swimming on stage, and then you can tighten it up instantly. That's why I'd find it really hard. I'd struggle to bring a vintage banjo on the road for those reasons, because not being able to adjust
it. They don't travel. They in general, Enda, they don't travel anyway. Like, I brought this over to, I just brought it to London, doing a workshop, a couple of gigs over there a few years ago, and I just I wanted obviously to play my banjo. I didn't want to play a banjo that someone was going to just lend me, because you don't know what you're going to get. So I brought it with me on the plane. It was on, booked a seat, away you go. But God, it was about a month after I got home that it got back to what it was, just because of the journey, I think, more than anything, and having to let all the strings down for the flight. And the poor thing was just, it was traumatized after one Ryanair flight. Sorry, Michael O'Leary. He won't be
That's
watching this anyway.
that's the name of your next album, The Traumatized Banjo.
Yeah.
Or maybe it should be a book, a kind of a self-help book for musicians.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was yeah. Me and the banjo were traumatized after after it.
I came up with I was asked to give a talk at an American workshop one time, and they wanted like the people that influenced you, and a bit of background history. And I said I wanted to talk about the difficulties of being a banjo player, and that I wanted to title the talk "Banjo Dysmorphia." What I play and what you hear are two completely different things.
Yeah, or what I play, what you hear, and how I feel.
Exactly.
Oh dear.
Do you suffer a bit with that?
Oh yeah, completely. Oh Jesus, yeah. Even yeah, incredibly. What the things that run through your head, like when you're standing behind the banjo, putting out there your music versus what they're hearing. You'd hope it sounds half decent most of the time, but yeah, the stuff that goes through your head. Oh Jesus. Oh yeah.
Banjo imposter syndrome.
Yeah, but banjo trauma. It is trauma.
Yeah, I think you have to be traumatized to want to play it in the first place, and then.
Well, there's an element of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is definitely. It's one of them things, isn't it? Where you, I don't know if you remember one of the years that this was before the recital in Milltown actually became an official recital. Not long after poor Stephen Madden passed away, we decided to have like a banjo session on a Wednesday in one of the pubs in town.
A very short interjection to explain what Milltown is. It refers to the town of Milltown Malbay in County Clare in Ireland, where a summer school is held every July called the Willie Clancy Summer School. It's a mecca for Irish musicians. Many go there to attend the classes. Most people go there to play music in the pubs, and sessions can go from early morning until very early the following morning. It's almost a rite of passage for young musicians. I went there for 18 years in a row, loved every moment of it. It's a wild, wild week. It's amazing.
So the first year it was just the teachers, and we told anyone that was in the classes, if you want to come in and sit down and play a few tunes for the afternoon, brilliant, great. So we were in, I think it was the Players pub in the middle of Milltown. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the windows on the front of the Players bar, when they're fully open, you can actually you can lean into the pub from the street as you walk past. So what happened was the first year kind of went okay, and then the second year, obviously there was an awful lot more banjo players in there, and I was facing the window, so you could see all the people walking by, and it happened to be a gorgeous day outside, and there was just this instant reaction. So you could see someone walk by and they'd be like, oh, what's that? What's that? Oh. And then they'd put their heads in the window, and they either absolutely loved the fact that there was 30 banjos in there playing, or they just got this whole kind of recoiling attitude at the window where they just go, oh my God, that sounds horrendous. And they just keep walking. It was such a funny reaction to see. Some people were just like, oh, that sounds amazing. I love the sound of that, all them banjos together. And other people were just like, oh my God, that's just torture. And they just keep walking.
I'm convinced we Banjo 3, we sold out our very first gig in Galway Arts Festival. And bearing in mind the band, the name described what it was at that time. It no longer does. And it was, not only was it sold out, but there was 50 or 60 people around the block trying to get into the Roisin Dubh in Galway. And
happy day.
Yeah, I was convinced it's because there's all of these closeted banjo lovers. They won't really admit it in public. They're walking down the road and they see 30 banjos in a pub and they're like, yes! I didn't even know I needed this in my life.
Yeah. But there are so many people that it's it's a love-hate. It's like Marmite. You love it or you hate it. And I think the sound of the banjo is exactly the same. You either instantly love the sound of it, or you just can't inflict that on your ears, one or the other.
You see, I feel like it's my life's mission is to move the banjo away from Marmite to marmalade, that everybody kind of likes it and some people love it.
Yeah, a Marmite marmalade thing. Yeah.
There's my next book, From Marmite to Marmalade. God, I'm on fire today, Theresa.
With your banjo. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, it must be the old internet. There is fog, actually, just rolling up the hill at the moment. And do you know what? The only time my internet did not work for me was when there was fog.
Really?
Believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, honest to God. Apart from that, I have unbelievable internet connection up here, which is quite good considering I'm living on the side of a mountain.
So, why did it take you so long to record your debut solo album, BANJO'ista?
Yeah, that question. Why were you so old?
That's not what I said.
I know, but someone did say that to me once. I was like, old? Really? Oh yeah, I suppose I was. Why? I don't. Well, I suppose a mishmash of different things. Like I had at that stage fully committed to a music career, if you like. I had ditched every other job that I wanted to do at that stage. I actually really enjoyed, found a real enjoyment in teaching, and like to the point where I really did question, why didn't I do this years ago? Like, what was I thinking? I should have just done this like 10 years ago instead of only doing it 3 or 4 years ago. And I suppose when you're gonna do that, then you need a bit of evidence, don't you? You need to say, well, I can actually play. Like you can't expect people to just take your word for it as a teacher if you're not going to put yourself out there musically as well and go, okay, for good or for bad, whatever you think of this, this is it. This is what I do. This is how I play. So, and then people then make their own decision on whether they like your playing, whether they like your style, whether they are then going to like what you teach, because you're obviously going to teach what you know. So that was probably a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, it's a big ask, I feel, to do a solo banjo album, having done one many years ago. I was the opposite to you. I was afraid if I didn't get it out in my 20s that I'd be too late. I don't know what I was going to be late for exactly. And I haven't felt the inclination to do another one since, many, many years later. But it's a big ask, isn't it?
Neither will I.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, it is, Enda. God, it's a really hard thing to do. I found it very tough because you're obviously your own worst critic, and you get to that point where everything you do, it kind of either begins to annoy you, or you're not really sure whether you like that, or there's just so many elements of it. Like it's very soul bearing, put it that way. It really is,
Do you feel like you have to have something to say? I mean, I had a lot to say 20 years ago, when I probably still have far too much to say.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Did I have a lot? No, I didn't really have an awful lot to say, apart from that's it. That's me. Like, where put it out there. This is what I do. No, that was, and I probably treated it a little bit like, kind of like my music life journey so far, kind of thing. So there was plenty of padding, put it that way, because I didn't do it when I was 20 and did it when I was 40. So there was plenty of, bits and pieces to put in the sleeve notes, put it that way.
Yeah. If you could play music session or a concert with any musician, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, Jesus, Enda. Well, I would have to say one of my music heroes I've always really liked his playing is Kevin Burke, the fiddle player. And I actually got to do that 2 years ago down in UL. And I didn't know that I was going down to teach a one-day workshop with they do like a master class for the people doing their degree down there. And I didn't realize that Kevin was also going to be doing a master class as well. And then we ended up having to literally cobble together a lunchtime concert for 20 minutes, half an hour. So that was like, oh my God, I actually got to play with one of my musical heroes as a kid. So, and I've got a very funny Kevin Burke story as well to tell you, if you'd like to hear it.
Yes, please.
So when we used to own a pub locally, and Kevin, I think on his mother's side, they're actually, like, his mum is from the local area. She's not that far from Chulstrand, where you played in the pub. Do you remember? And so one day I was working in the pub, and it was like a pub and a shop and all the rest of it. So this guy came into the shop, and we had like petrol pumps and everything, and he pulled in to get some petrol for the car, and he walked in the door, and I was like, oh my God, he really looks like Kevin Burke. But then I was like, just the way your head is doing like 10-second somersault, and I was like, what would he be doing around here? Oh God, maybe it's his brother Noel. Noel is a fiddle player, and he makes bows for fiddles, and he lives over in Newport. I was like, yeah, maybe it's Noel. God, they really look alike. So this guy came in and he said, is it okay if I fill the car with petrol? I was like, yep, no problem. And then he came back in to pay, and he said, I said to him, I said, sorry now for asking you this question. I said, but by any chance, are you Kevin Burke's brother? Kevin Burke he's a really well-known fiddle player, and I went off into this little like rant about he used to be like one of my still is one of my favorite fiddle players from when I was a kid, and and I must have just twittered on for about 30 seconds, and he goes, no, I'm not. I went, all right, sorry about that. And he went, no, I'm not Kevin Burke's brother, I'm Kevin Burke. I went, oh God, I just died. Like, if the ground could have swallowed me up, that was the time and the place to do it. And I was just like, oh my God. But he was so gracious about it. What he ended up saying was listen, I'm playing a gig tonight at Matt Malloy's. If you want to come along, by all means do. But I couldn't because I was working. But that was my Kevin Burke story. And then when I met him then 2 years ago down in UL, when we were doing the concert, I said, I've actually got a story to tell about you, Kevin. And he goes, what's that? So I started my story about the petrol pumps, and he goes, you were the girl behind the counter that really embarrassed herself. I was like, yeah, that was me. So that was my Kevin Burke story. So I've got to live the dream. I got to actually play tunes with him.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I did that Limerick teaching series as well, and when I went down to play the lunchtime concert, it was Charlie Lennon, who I think was utterly distressed at having to play with a banjo player.
Got over it.
And it was okay. Charlie Lennon and Oisin McDiarmid. I mean, two more fabulous fiddlers, and they went and they played first and second, and then it was me. And I probably played the worst I've ever played in my entire life, because I was just mesmerized. I was like, oh my God, I've just listened to, heavenly Irish music. Okay, I'm going to plonk out a couple of jigs. And I was like, oh, please. I wanted to go home and give
Oh
up music
no.
and go drive a bus or something. Wasn't as pleasurable as your story.
No, mine was, I have to say, was just, yeah, it was lovely. It was so nice. And Kevin is just he's such a lovely man, as well as being a great fiddle player. He's a really, really nice guy. Very funny, very articulate, and just, yeah, very, very good now. Good company to be in for a day. So he was.
Yeah. It's nice when you meet your musical heroes and they're decent people.
Yeah, it is. It really is,
Wonderful. Theresa, thank you so much for taking the time, chat, all things
You're
banjo.
very welcome.
Yeah. Absolute pleasure. And
yeah, you too, Enda. It's great to see you.
Yeah,
even in lockdown.
Yeah, we'll be here another while yet, but we will get through this.
I'd say so. We will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.